If you like watching birds in your garden, and you begin to notice them elsewhere, and you may be on the edge of an addiction. Birds are as fascinating and as varied as the landscapes of Britain, for landscapes define birds. Our gardens are one of the most important of all habitats for birds. They can be wildlife landscapes in miniature. Creating a garden for birds mirrors a story of the creation of our landscapes that began 8,000 years ago in the Ice Age. Today, these high, cold winter uplands of Scotland are much as Britain must have been as the ice retreated. And here, birds like the ptarmigan can still be found, specially adapted and camouflaged to survive in these inhospitable conditions. A snow bunting searches for seeds. More at home in Greenland and Iceland, the snow bunting breeds and winters here. A female dotterel has arrived early from North Africa to nest here. This mountaintop wader will lay the eggs, but will leave it to her mate to raise the young. Food is thinly spread over these snowy wastes. The golden eagle must hunt over vast areas for food, dead or alive. Life is a bitter struggle in this harsh landscape. As the climate warmed and the ice melted, lochs appeared, filling hollows gouged by the ice or left by melting glaciers. They were colonized by birds like the red-throated diver that still today comes inland from the sea as the winter ice melts. The smallest of our divers, the red-throated, has a distinctive up-tilted bill. In the winter, it loses its red throat. One person familiar with this wild highland landscape is Adam Watson, an ecologist who knows its distinctive birds.
I think there's a Scandinavian feel about this place. You know, we've got a little bit here of that northern country that the Russians call the taiga and the magnificent birds that are in it. I see a few golden-eye and tufted duck out there. The golden-eye is, of course, it's got a golden eye, which is a remarkable feature, and the drake has got a bottle dark green head with a big white spot. The duck is a more chestnut-coloured head, and the juveniles are a bit more chocolatey and dark. The drakes are interesting because when they take off, they've got flight feathers which make a rattling sound, so that even if you haven't actually seen the white spot, if you hear the rattle, you know that that's them. Now, here's the sun coming out, and it's really beautiful along the loch there. Ah, Slavonian grebe, a beauty. A beautiful grebe with yellow gold ear tufts, dark head, and beautiful chestnut breast. And there's a fair number of them in some of these North Highland lochs. Lochs like this, which are a result of the melting ice. And a lot of the time it's down because it's diving, but it's up at the moment. I can just see it. The Slavonian grebe is quite a confiding grebe. It's not all that shy, so you can get good views of them. And I've often stood quietly at the edge of a loch and watched the family with the young, and not bothered by people as long as you keep quiet.
Surrounding this loch is a remnant of the ancient pine forest that once covered much of the Highlands. This forest is home to some unusual birds, one of which is a bird found nowhere else in the world, the Scottish crossbill. Crossbills have crossed beaks for winkling pine seeds from cones. The Scottish crossbill lives and nests in the Scots pine and feeds solely on its seeds. It's the large bill that marks this bird as a Scottish crossbill rather than the otherwise similar common crossbill. These coniferous forests are home to another remarkable bird, the capercaillie. Gurgles, pops and belches echo through the trees as this huge turkey-like forest grouse shows off. This now scarce bird is found nowhere else in Britain. As small as the capercaillie is large, but just as rare, is another bird found only in this open pine forest.
Unlike a plantation, here it's totally different. Every tree is different from every other one. And this is just ideal mixture for the crested tit. The best way to pick them up actually is not to hope to see them, but to hear them. That's often the first I know there's one there is the call, because it's absolutely diagnostic. Now, unlike the various other calls that tits make, thin, cheeping sounds, the crested tit gives a rattling trill, which no other tit gives, and that gives it away right away. And when you hear the trill, you look up and you see the bird. Tit about the size of a coal tit, but quite different in colour. Pale brown on the back, white underneath, and extraordinary crest sweeping up of white feathers with black bars. And then there's a ring of black goes from the back of the neck right round the front here, and another little bit at the front, and a white face. So it's absolutely clear. And you'll see they use the dead stumps with the rotting wood to excavate nesting holes.
Without Scots pine for the crested tit to excavate its nest in, there can be no crested tit. Most of these hills were once forested. Then the trees were felled and sheep and deer prevented them from regrowing. The resulting moors are now home to different birds. The plaintive curlew breeds here. The diminutive merlin, a bird of prey of these wild open spaces, scans the moor for small birds. A golden plover has come up here to nest, from the farmland where it spends the winters. A meadow pipit, a small ground-living bird, has chicks nearby. A stonechat calls like clinking stones. A red grouse clucks in alarm. A male hen harrier is quartering the moor. Harriers have slender wings that give them buoyancy and maneuverability at low level. The larger female hen harrier is brown with a white band above the tail. The male will have 2 or more females up here on the moor. These rocky gorges are the haunt of the upland version of the blackbird, the shy ring ouzel. This uncommon summer visitor from Africa nests in the banks beside the streams. Both male and female ring ouzels have a white ring around the breast. Beside these turbulent mountain streams, indeed in them, can be found another remarkable bird, the dipper. Searching the streams for elusive dippers is biologist Stephanie Tyler.
I love being out along these streams. It doesn't matter whether it's an upland stream, a lowland stream, they're just magical places. The little stream here is superb because it drains from a moorland catchment. You don't get the huge sort of rises and falls that you get lower down on the river. So it's always moving, there's always water in it, however dry a year. The sponge up on the moorland lets the water out gradually. Goodness, it's slippery. What I'm looking for here is a nest of a dipper. This is a classic site behind a little waterfall. And what I've been doing all these years is trying to find as many nests as possible to record clutch size and brood size, really to see how the dippers are faring on different tributaries. Some tributaries are much better than others in terms of numbers of dippers and the number of eggs and young they rear. In fact, dippers are absolutely superb indicators of the health of the environment, the health of the whole river system. But sadly today, no dippers under this site. The dipper is truly a quite remarkable bird. It's a small, dumpy little bird about the size of a blackbird. It's the only songbird, our only songbird in Britain, which actually goes under the water. It's an aquatic songbird, but it doesn't have webbed feet like a duck. It's got fairly ordinary looking feet, but they're very long, strong feet. It's got very short wings, and it uses those in the deep pools to dive down into the water, sometimes in pools up to 1 metre deep. And it dives down to the bottom and it finds little invertebrates that are in amongst the stones on the riverbed, sometimes small fish, a variety of prey. The whole of its life is linked to the river. It never moves away from the river, summer or winter. They're called dippers because they dip. I mean, you see them standing on a rock in midstream and they bob up and down. Little curtsies, if you like. If you look at this little stream, the water's rushing down. It's moving rapidly over the boulders, lots of white water, lots of movement. And if you imagine the dipper sitting on the rock there, bobbing up and down, that movement actually makes it merge into the background. Perhaps if it was still, it would be more obvious.
Dippers nest, if not behind waterfalls, then under bridges, and they use the same nest sites year after year.
Here's a lovely nest on an artificial site, a ledge below a nice old stone bridge. It's a large nest. It's made of moss and bits of leaf and grass, and inside there's a beautiful cup, more like a blackbird nest, with a grassy cup lined with leaves. The whole thing beautifully insulated against the cold, and if it was in a wet environment, against the wet, but high and dry here. I'm just going to check to see what is actually in the nest, and there are young. And there's a dipper nestling about 6 days old here. I'm getting them out to see when they're ready for ringing. We do ring these so that we can find out where they go to, how long they live and such like. There's just two in this brood, a fairly small brood, but not untypical, atypical of a late second brood. A long-term study has immense value. You can look at how populations change over time. If the dipper population is healthy, then we know that that river is healthy and will support fish and all the other wildlife that it should, and be a good place for people to visit. But if there are very few dippers, then we know that there's something wrong with that environment.
And for the moment at least, this river is healthy. Just as the dipper dips to blend with the tumbling water, so the grey wagtail wags its tail as it forages for insects along the stream. The common sandpiper, with a distinctive white notch at the shoulder, is a wader of these freshwater streams. And beside the river, a male redstart collects insects. It'll have a nest in the woods that the river runs through. This oakwood is in Wales. It's known as the Dinas, the fortress. Perhaps there was once a fortress atop this hill. Today, the oaks are home to some special woodland birds. A wood warbler, come here from Africa to breed. It has a delightful shivering trill of a song. It's the abundant summer caterpillars that bring these birds to nest in the oak wood. The lack of dense undergrowth makes it easier for some birds to collect fallen caterpillars, easier for others, like the pied flycatcher, to catch flying insects. The oak trees here are comparatively young. Nest boxes must take the place of the natural holes that would be found in old trees. A male flycatcher brings an insect for his mate to feed to their chicks. The river flows slower and deeper in England now. This is water full of minnows and stickleback that attract a flashing jewel of a bird. A bird that Charlie Hamilton James is in search of, the kingfisher. Charlie is a wildlife cameraman.
This
is ideal kingfisher habitat. It's got wooded areas, it's got steep banks for nesting in. It's just perfect. I don't know what it is I find particularly attractive about kingfishers. I guess it's just the colour, and they're so stunning. And I guess it was that drew me to them in the first place when I was about 7. And ever since then I've been completely obsessed with them.
All most people ever see of a kingfisher is a quick blue flash. To film kingfishers requires patience and knowledge of their habits, the result of hours of study.
You don't always have to wait long for the kingfishers. If you've got a territorial bird, it's going to be surveying its territory regularly, and on that territory it'll have... That's it. So it's on the opposite side of the bank. It's just inspecting the hide. Okay, he's coming. There he is. An adult male. You can tell he's an adult because he's got pink feet. Females tend to be slightly duller, although not much. And chicks have black feet with a white tip on the beak. He's got 100% concentration at the moment. But once he spotted a fish, oh, he spotted one there. Oh, he's down. A whole sequence from leaving the perch to back onto the perch can take under a second. And once it's got back to the perch, it'll kill a fish by holding its tail and smacking its head against a branch until it's stunned or dead. At the moment, though, this male has a nest up there, he's got a nest down there. It's a very rare occurrence to have a male with 2 females, and it's obviously a lot of work for him. Both females are on a second brood. Sometimes they'll have 3 broods a year. Usually they'll have 2. I've had them have 4. Oh, he's gonna let me. Every time I see one, it gets me going. They are so totally stunning when they're sitting in front of me. You've got this tiny blue diamond sitting there. And it really is bright blue, and you can never really capture that on film. And I guess that's what it is for me that attracts me to them so much.
The river runs now through mixed woodland, home to birds that live on the trunks of trees. A tree creeper searches mouse-like over the bark of an old tree. It has a nest full of young behind a piece of peeling bark. Tree creepers usually work upwards from the foot of a tree. Another bird that clings to the trunks and branches of trees, searching the bark, is one with a very different shape, the nuthatch. This nuthatch is cementing up an old woodpecker hole with mud to a precise nuthatch squeeze. to keep competitors from its nest site. The nuthatch is blue-grey above, sandy gold below, with a sharp, strong beak. It likes mature trees, and it's resident in parks and gardens the year round. The original manufacturers of this hole, the woodpeckers, must have moved elsewhere in the wood. And searching for them is a research biologist, Ken Smith.
This is very special wood for woodpecker. It really has very high numbers, and I'm interested in knowing just how many there are each year. So what I'm listening for is the noise of young woodpeckers in the nest. They make a really loud, continuous and it's when you've got 4 or 5 young in the nest, and they're all calling like this, wanting to be fed by the adults. So they're making a noise, so the adult comes and feeds them. And you can, if you listen now, you can just hear it. So they go on and on and on all day long making this noise. So it's a perfect way of finding the nest. It saves a lot of hard work in searching for them when they're building the things.
Early in the year, great spotted woodpeckers are in search of mates. They proclaim their territories by drumming on hard, resonant wood. Each individual has its own tattoo. Woodpeckers can also chisel their way into trees to build their nest holes. To cope with the huge forces involved in hammering away at wood, woodpeckers have a cushioned brain.
I think I can hear something now. Yep. There's a woodpecker nest near here. I think there's a silver birch over there that looks a good candidate, a dead birch tree leaning over. Let's go and have a closer look and see what we can find. Yep, I can hear them. That's a fresh hole. You can look at the hole and it's really perfectly round, very sharp edges. The birds have actually excavated that this year. My guess is these young are quite well fed. They're not making all that much noise. Some can make a lot more noise than this. And this year is actually very good for caterpillars. No, there we are. There's a great spot just called then, so that's one of the parents coming back. And I guess if we move back a bit, we might see them come into the nest. No, it's still sat there watching us. I can just see it in the tree behind. Ah, here we are. And that's the female great spotted woodpecker. Has no red on the back of the head. And you notice that it actually fed the young at the entrance hole to the nest. And that tells me that those young have probably only got about 4 days to go in the nest before they fledge. Okay, that's the male. You can see the beak there, it's absolutely full of caterpillars. They actually hold them down with their tongue, so they can open their beak and call even though they seem to have an absolute beakful. Very often it's a male that does most of the feeding late on, but I'm not sure on this nest, and it seems that both are feeding. Have a look in here. Tie myself off first. Let's put that one in first. get the mirror in. Let's have a look. How many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep, so there are 5 in there, which is good. They've all survived. They're pretty well feathered now. Eyes are open. Probably got about a week or 8 days to go before they leave the nest, so they're looking pretty good. And they're very quiet, so I guess they're pretty well fed. It's really important to leave trees like this standing in woodlands to provide nesting sites for woodpeckers. They're just amazing birds. They're colourful, noisy, and quite aggressive. They have a lot of positive things like that going for them. And of course, whenever you start studying a species, you really get fascinated by it and start to really love the bird and get very enthusiastic about them.
Woodpeckers are normally associated with trees, but the green woodpecker, the largest and heaviest of our woodpeckers, mostly feeds on the ground. It is, in fact, an ant-eater. It's often seen on lawns where the ants can more easily be found in the short grass. Both male and female green woodpeckers have red crowns, but only the male has a red moustache. The juveniles are rather spotty versions of the adults, but this juvenile is female, for it too has no red moustache. By far the most extensive bird landscape in Britain is farmland. The traditional mosaic of small fields with hedgerows, with meadows with wildflowers and with farm animals provides for the needs of many birds. A goldfinch feeds on dandelion seeds. A bullfinch. The meadows are frequented by birds like the English partridge and the lapwing nesting in an open field. Hedgerows provide shelter, roosting sites, and nesting places for birds. A yellowhammer's nest in the hedge. The yellowhammer's song is often rendered as a little bit of bread and no cheese. Sometimes the cheese is left off. A narrow lane with puddles provides water for a linnet. The male has a cherry red breast. But hedgerows and meadows and muddy lanes have vanished from much of the countryside, replaced by barren prairies of little value to birds. There are few insects or wildflower seeds here. Gone from this landscape are the birds. The once common corn bunting is scarce and local, its jangling song rarely heard now. The shy tree sparrow, distinguished from the house sparrow by its chocolate brown cap and black cheek. It's declined by 82% over the last 25 years. Even common garden birds like the song thrush are in serious decline. Here in the Sussex Downs, in the most wooded county in Britain, there are still good numbers of song thrushes, and particularly so around the village of Hoyle. A project is in hand investigating the reasons for the song thrush decline. So why are they still doing well here in Hoyle? On the case is researcher Roy Taylor.
This little village here has got 8 pairs of song thrushes around these gardens, and what I'm doing now is I'm walking around the gardens principally to try and find the nests of the birds, then we can monitor how well they fare in their breeding success. It's quite a unique project because we have unlimited access to these gardens. People are so concerned about the plight of the song thrush that they're happy for us to walk around gardens like this to look for nests. This is an ideal garden for thrushes. Lots of habitat for them. We've got lots of thick nesting sites, you know, lots of evergreen cover so they can begin nesting in March before all the other leaves are out. Then lots of food supplies, lots of vegetable patches, lots of nice lawns with earthworms, lots of trees where they can find caterpillars. And then under bushes like this, we've got lots of snails for them to find. So there's everything a song thrush can need in this garden. This pair we're looking for in the garden now. I know they've already had 3 breeding attempts this year, and the male's been singing this morning. We've heard the male, so the female's probably on the 4th attempt. So the idea today is to try and find that 4th nesting attempt.
Song thrushes are from the same family as the blackbird, which is also beginning to decline in numbers. The largest of our resident thrushes is the grey, pale missel thrush, also declining, but not as seriously as the song thrush.
Ah, now this is what I've been looking for. This is really interesting. See here, we've got a big pile of bashed up snails. This is a song thrush anvil. And the song thrush is unique, and it's the only thrush that's developed this ability to bash open these snails. And you'll be walking around and you'll hear this sort of tap, tap, tapping, and it's the actual song thrushes banging them. They'll use stones, they'll use big paving flags, they'll use the road, they'll use anything, but this obviously is a favourite anvil. I mean, we must have a dozen, 15 snails here. So I suspect there's a high chance that the new nest is not too far away from us at the moment.
Song thrushes rely on snails to see them through hard times. And slug pellets also kill snails. No snails may mean no song thrushes.
Unfortunately, finding nests is not the easiest task in the world, and it may take us a good 3/4 of an hour to an hour to thoroughly search this garden to ensure that we found the nest. Typical nest site, well hidden in some dense bramble. This is the 4th nest of this pair. This is the first time they've managed to hatch any young. So far they've lost all their eggs to predators. Now what we're doing here is we're actually taking a series of measurements. We measure the leg here, the tarsus, and we'll weigh this chick. And what this tells us enables us to work out how well they're growing. So we know if the adults are bringing in lots of food. So if we see some big healthy chicks, we know that in this area there's lots of food for the adults to find. So we've got an 8-day-old song thrush chick which weighs just under 50 grams. Since the project started, we've colour-ringed over 700 young song thrushes this way, just in the Sussex site alone. And this tells us vitally important information. We can see where they go, what kind of habitats they require, what food they take, and most importantly, we can work out how many of them survive.
It appears that these song thrushes are able to find sufficient food to raise healthy young. But there may no longer be enough food available in the wider countryside to see the youngsters through the winter, when they're competing with experienced adults and with more aggressive blackbirds. Unless a solution is found, the song thrush may go the way of another once common farmland bird, now heard only in the furthest corners of the British Isles. Here in Northern Ireland, the call of the corncrake.
This bird, the corncrake, is a remarkable bird because of the fact that it was so common. Everywhere, I think across the whole of Britain, it could be heard from nearly everybody's bedroom. I can certainly remember lying in North Belfast in my bedroom at night and hearing them in the nearby fields. But it's a very rare bird now. The kind of field that we have here is typical of a field of 30 years ago or more. What's so special about it is that it's a hay field which is not cut until at least the end of July. And there's a broad edge which isn't cultivated at all, and where there are several patches of nettles, which is useful for them when they arrive first in spring. They can hide in the nettles and venture out only when they know nobody is looking. This bird doesn't look as though it could fly even at all, and you rarely do see it flying when it's here in a hayfield. They skulk, they run away if you do disturb them, and you only have a few seconds of a glance of them. So the fact that it actually gets up in September or late August and flies possibly at several thousand feet up all the way to East Africa is just almost unbelievable, but they do it.
One of many problems to beset the corncrake has been the conversion to cornfields of the hay meadows in which they nest. And then those few hay meadows that remain are now cut much earlier for silage, destroying the nests and chicks.
The trouble is, if it's cut from the outside round and round into the centre, the corncrakes get killed because they hide in the centre. But if the field is cut literally from the centre out, the corncrakes are encouraged to move away across through the hedge into the next field and they're safe. So there's just a little hope for the corncrake, perhaps.
And the corncrake is now beginning to increase. The tide may now be turning for many other species. There's a new generation of people interested in birds.
We're at a wonderful place called Wormwood Scrubs, in the middle of London practically. I remember reading about Wormwood Scrubs in the London Bird Report from the 60s and reading about a hen harrier that had been seen here. So I thought, well, it might be an interesting idea to come down and have a look at the area. When I came here, I found it very uninspiring to look at. But it's interesting because I gave myself a challenge. I came here every day from mid-August through to October, and for the first week I saw absolutely nothing. And then suddenly, after a week, Wormwood Scrubs opened up its secrets to me. This is a very tiny pocket of woodland. I mean, I'm talking about a pocket here, but within this, I mean, you get blackbirds, greenfinches, in the winter, chaffinch. Robins are also very common. There should be about, there's a wren there. A long-tailed tit. Long-tailed tits are quite common. They tend to breed on the eastern side of the area. There's two there, and they're probably looking for a nest site at the moment. I can hear them calling. Very thin sort of tss. You may hear in the background blue tits calling. That sort of tinkling call. And they're fairly common here. This time of year in winter, they'll be roving with other species of tits. But as it's sort of mid-February now, coming up to Valentine's Day, they're getting into their courtship mode now, so you may start seeing them pairing off now. We have a bullfinch. We've got, in fact, there's 3 bullfinches there. I think there's 2 males and 1 female. The female just flown out just now. They breed in the area. During winter especially, you get numbers of gulls coming to roost on the actual football pitches, and the best time to see the gulls really is either first thing in the morning before they fly off to the local reservoirs, or during the evening when they come in. Most of the gulls out there at the moment are black-headed gulls. It's always worth looking through flocks of birds. I mean, I'm one for looking at any flock of birds, looking through them, because you never know what could be amongst them. And at this stage, there's 2 common gulls amongst this flock of black-headed gulls. Common gulls are slightly bigger, and they've got green legs and yellow bills. And they're not quite as common as their name suggests, but we still get you know, a fair number during the winter. This is Brent Reservoir, basically situated in northwest London, about 5 miles from central London, and it's an oasis. I mean, I've been coming here for 22 years now, and I cut my teeth as a bird watcher here, and it's a special place because it's good for waterfowl. I'm just scanning through the birds that are out there now, and there's a few gadwall there, 1 or 2 upending. The gadwall's very like a mallard, but it's a very beautiful bird when you look at it, because the male's got a black tail, black rump should I say, a grey body, brownish top, very dainty bird. There's 2 types of ducks you get here, 2 groups of duck. You've got the dabbling ducks, you've got the ones that feed on the surface, and they basically use their bills and they either just dabble on the surface or they actually upend. Those birds are like are mallards, gadwall, teal, shoveler. They're the dabbling ducks. The diving ducks, there's some out there now, and they dive for their food, actually dive beneath the surface to hunt for mollusks and fish and what have you. There's a few tufted duck, which are the black and white ones, and the females are brown and off-white. So it just shows that it pays to visit areas like here. You know, it's nice to go to Norfolk, it's nice to go to Kent or all the other sort of rural areas, but it's also nice to come back home and find some birds for yourself in your local patch. And I've seen many species of birds in this particular area that you see quite regularly elsewhere, but to see them in London, it's just you know, it just gets you so excited.
A bustling London suburb harbours another example of the growing interest in birds. Behind this unassuming house is a remarkable haven.
One of the really extraordinary things is that people trot up the road and see an ordinary suburban house in Surbiton, queen of the suburbs, and feel that they're in the country.
The Curtises have transformed their back garden into a new bird landscape, a wildlife garden.
I think it all just gradually stemmed from wanting native plants to bring the birds in.
Plant the wildflowers that are now scarce in so much of the countryside, and they will attract insects and produce seed. The seeds and insects will bring in the birds.
At first sight, wildlife gardening, one thinks of growing flowers, having a pond and all the rest of it. But you come to realise after a while what you're actually growing is wildlife. Insects, butterflies, birds. Now they all come into this garden.
Gardens can be magical places for birds.
I think the magic is providing a habitat that you hope will be used by the wildlife when they come and use it. The pond we put in because all water is an absolute draw for wildlife. If you want birds, the requisite to put in is some kind of water, a bird bath or a small pond. That comes first and then the feeding comes afterwards.
The Curtises have recorded 61 species of birds in their garden.
So far on either side, our neighbours don't seem to mind the fact that essentially we're growing things that people would regard as weeds and which we found totally beautiful. It's not an easy option. No gardening is. It's just a different sort of maintenance. It happens at different times of the year. But one of the things that struck me since we've been doing this is that you suddenly realise, all right, we own this plot, but in fact, we share it with the real owners, the millions and millions of creatures crawling about underneath, the birds that fly, the foxes that come, the toads. This is their patch.
You never know what you're going to see or hear. I never want to go away. I never want to go away on holiday because I never know what I'm going to miss.
Those who do go on holiday to mid-Wales can drop in at a community-based project for a bird that is synonymous with the Welsh landscape. School children are watching live video of a bird that was persecuted till just a few pairs remained, the red kite. The red kite was a common scavenger in Britain's streets in the Middle Ages. Today, it soars over the countryside, searching for carrion. There's no mistaking its long, angled wings and deeply forked tail. As a result of careful conservation, this beautiful bird of prey once again has a place in the Welsh landscape. And it's now being reintroduced to England and to Scotland. And help is at hand for another bird of prey.
OK, Matt, if you're all right there, I'll see you either in a bit or in Newtown Hospital. I'm doing some work here for the RSPB, monitoring peregrines, and I'm going now to ring the youngsters as a hope that that will act as a deterrent for anybody wanting to take the youngsters for illegal falconry.
The peregrine falcon was almost wiped out by pesticides in the 1960s and by egg collectors. The peregrine, our largest and fastest falcon, is a magnificent hunter. Iolo Williams is ensuring that the peregrine has a future in this part of Wales.
We've got two chicks. Looks like there's one male and one female, and they are vicious little things. If I can just get over one of them for you now. That's what they look like. Beautiful little things. This is the male. His feet aren't as big as the female's feet. I need to get in and out as fast as I can, so I'll get going. I'll ring the youngsters now. Every peregrinae that I now monitor brings me out onto the hills like this, just me and them. And I suppose there's an element of, can I get down to that nest to monitor the birds, to put these rings on, to mark the eggs, to look after the birds, because I know that if egg thieves know where these nests are, they'll make every effort to get there. So I just try to get there before them. Okay, boys. Ta-da. Okay, now this is not going to be textbook rock climbing, but it's the fastest way in and out of here, I think.
With active protection and the clean-up of the countryside, the peregrine has been able to recover naturally. And now, after an absence of nearly 80 years, a simply enormous bird is being reintroduced, restored to its rightful place as part of the natural landscape of wild Britain. The magnificent sea eagle, with its 7-foot wingspan, a bird that would have been here in the Ice Age. The story of Britain's birds and the landscape comes full circle